I still remember that day, as if it just happened, like a shadow that refuses to leave me no matter how much I try to forget. I wasn't prepared for it, honestly. None of us ever are when life decides to throw something so shocking, so painful, right in front of our eyes. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind where you walk through the city and everything feels routine. The cars honking, people rushing past you with their own worries, and the world looking so normal on the surface. But hidden behind all that noise was a story that I never thought I would see with my own eyes. A story that changed me forever. I was walking, my bag clutched tight against me, my mind full of the small little problems of my day, the kind of things you think matter so much, until suddenly, life shakes you awake. That's when I saw her. A woman sitting on the cold ground, her body curled slightly, her clothes torn and faded from 100 days of suffering. But it wasn't just her. Two children, no older than 6 or 7, clung to her side. Their faces told the story before she even could. The kind of tiredness that no child should ever carry. The kind of the hunger that steals the light from their eyes. I froze. People walked by as if she was invisible. Some turned their heads away. Others pretended to be busy on their phones. That's how it always is, isn't it? We see the pain, but we teach ourselves to look past it because it's easier. But for me, in that moment, I couldn't look away. Something about her face wouldn't let me. I stared too long, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't just some random woman. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. Because I knew her. My mind raced back to years ago, a different time, a different version of life. I had seen her before, in moments when her laughter used to echo in the air, when her eyes weren't hollow but full of dreams. Back then, she wasn't sitting on the sidewalk holding 2 hungry children. She was full of life, standing tall, someone people noticed for her spirit. And now, here she was, crumbling in front of the world that had chosen to forget her. I felt my knees weaken as memories stabbed through me. She had been wronged. I knew that much. There had been whispers, accusations, things said about her that weren't true. But the world doesn't care about truth when it's easier to judge. She had been cast out, blamed, crushed under the weight of things that weren't even her fault. And me? I had gone on with my life. I had walked away, thinking time would somehow heal everything. I never imagined it would come to this. I wanted to move closer, but fear held me back. What if she recognized me? What if she hated me for having a life she no longer had? The unfairness of it all clawed at me. I had been given chances. Doors had opened for me, while she had been pushed further into darkness. I had success, comfort, food on my table. She had nothing but 2 children holding her hands, hoping she could protect them from a world that had already turned its back on her. But as I stood there, frozen, she finally lifted her head. Our eyes met. For a second, the city around us disappeared. I expected anger, recognition, or even bitterness. But what I saw was worse. It was emptiness. A tiredness so deep, it looked like even tears had abandoned her. Her eyes didn't scream, didn't beg. They simply asked a silent question. Why? Why had life done this to her? I wanted to run. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen her. But I couldn't. Something inside me told me this moment mattered. that if I walked away now, I would never forgive myself. Yet my body betrayed me. I stayed frozen, staring, caught between guilt and fear. And then something inside me broke. I remembered the girl she used to be, the laughter, the warmth, the life she carried within her, and I couldn't understand how the same world that had lifted me higher had dragged her so low. The cruelty of it cut me like a knife. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about bad luck. This was about injustice. This was about the way society decides who gets a second chance and who doesn't. The children tugged at her dress, whispering something I couldn't hear. She turned slightly, comforting them the best she could. And I felt my heart ache in ways I can't even describe. I thought of my own life, the comforts I had, and how easily it could have been me sitting there if fate had been just a little different. That thought shook me so hard I almost stumbled. I wish I could tell you I walked right up to her in that moment, that I said something brave, that I changed her world right then and there. But the truth, I stood there, paralyzed. And that's when she looked at Ty again, really looked. Recognition flickered in her eyes, a spark of memory. And in that second, I knew she remembered me too. My chest tightened, my stomach turned. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if she wanted me near her or if my presence only made her pain worse. But I couldn't escape the truth staring back at me. Her story and mine were connected. And whether I liked it or not, the next choice I made would decide more than just the rest of her day. It could change everything. And as I stood there, caught in the weight of that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. I couldn't move, even though everything inside me screamed that I should. The crowd kept moving around us, strangers brushing past without realizing what was unfolding right there on the pavement. They didn't see the weight of it, the history between us, the unbearable truth that her life and mine had once walked side by side. But I saw it. I felt it in every breath that grew heavier in my chest. She blinked, slowly, and for a second I thought maybe she didn't really recognize me. Maybe I was just another stranger staring too long. But then her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, and my heart dropped. Because in that small flicker of recognition, I knew she remembered. She remembered everything. I stepped forward, almost without realizing, and the world around me blurred. My mind was split between the present and the past, memories rising like ghosts I had buried deep. I remembered when she had been full of fire, standing tall despite the odds stacked against her. She wasn't weak back then. No, she was strong. Stronger than most. But life has a way of breaking even the strongest when it decides you're an easy target. And for her, the blows never stopped coming. I remembered the whispers, the way people looked at her, how quickly they judged. It had started with one mistake, one rumor, and suddenly she was branded. No matter how much she tried to rise above it, the label stuck. People can be cruel that way. They don't let you forget. They strip you of your dignity. One glance, one word, one rejection at a time. Until eventually, you start believing the lies yourself. That's what they did to her. That's what crushed her future before it even had a chance to begin. And now, here she was, her children pulling gently at her arm, their eyes begging her for something to eat. For comfort, she didn't have to give. My throat tightened. I couldn't help but notice how thin they looked, their cheeks sunken, their little bodies too fragile. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. I wanted to shout, to ask the world how it could let this happen. How people could keep walking past as if 3 human lives weren't sitting right there in the dust. But I didn't shout. I stayed silent, watching, torn apart by guilt and confusion. Because deep inside, I knew the truth. Our paths had split not because she deserved this and I didn't, but because the world had chosen to give me chances it had denied her. That was the cruelty of it. 2 people, both deserving, both capable, but society decided who rose and who fell. She finally spoke, her voice so faint I almost didn't hear it. Please. Just that one word. She wasn't even asking for much. Just something small to carry her children through the day. The sound of her voice cracked something inside me. Gone was the confident girl I once knew. In her place was a woman broken by a world that had never given her mercy. I reached for my wallet, my hands trembling, but it felt wrong. It felt too small, too temporary. Money could buy them food for the night, maybe for a week, but it wouldn't erase the years stolen from her. The dignity ripped away, the unfairness of it all. And worse, it wouldn't erase my part in it because whether I wanted to admit it or not, I had turned my back when she needed someone to stand by her. I remembered the night it all began, the moment her life took that turn. People had been quick to believe the worst. They said things about her, things she swore weren't true. But no one stood up for her, not even me. I told myself I was protecting my own future, my own chances, but deep down I knew I left her to fight alone. And now, years later, this was the result. She shifted, adjusting the small bundle of her youngest child against her lap. And my chest ached at the sight. She had carried not only her children, but the weight of judgment, of hunger, of endless rejection. And all I could think was, why her? Why not me? Why did I get to live in comfort while she suffered like this? The injustice of it burned. It wasn't just about her story anymore. It was about every woman, every mother, every soul society had discarded without a second thought. She was just one face in a sea of forgotten lives. But to me, she wasn't faceless. She was someone I had once laughed with, someone whose dreams had been as real as mine. And seeing her like this shattered me. I wanted to reach out, to tell her I was sorry, to tell her I saw her, that I hadn't completely forgotten. But guilt held me back. Because what right did I have now? After all these years, after all my silence, did I even deserve to stand in front of her? Her eyes lifted once more, and this time there was no emptiness. There was recognition. Her gaze pierced me, cutting through every layer of denial I had built. She knew me. She knew exactly who I was. And that silent recognition was louder than any scream could have been. I froze under her stare, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But I couldn't, because her eyes were asking the one question I had no answer for. Why did you leave me to fall? And as the noise of the city faded into the background, as the weight of that moment pressed down on me, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about helping her now. This was about facing the truth I had buried for years. And the truth was about to demand an answer. I couldn't look away. Her eyes were locked on mine, heavy with memories we never spoke about, with words we had both swallowed years ago. The city moved around us, like nothing was happening. Cars honking, people rushing, vendors shouting. But for me, time had stopped. It was just her children, and the untearable silence between us. Her gaze was not pleading anymore. It was demanding. Demanding that I remember. Demanding that I acknowledge. Demanding that I finally face what I had run from all these years. I wanted to break it, to speak, but my throat closed up. Every word felt too small, too weak. What could I possibly say to erase the years of silence? What apology could cover the nights she had slept hungry, the doors that had been slammed in her face, the hands that had pushed her down instead of lifting her up? I remembered the night the rumors started. She had come to me, eyes red, hands shaking, begging me to believe her. "They're lying," she said. "You know me. You know I would never." Her voice had cracked before she finished, but I hadn't answered. I had stood frozen, watching her crumble, telling myself I couldn't get involved. My future was at stake. My reputation. My chances. And so I had stayed quiet. That silence had been a weapon. It had been louder than every cruel word they threw at her. Because when she looked at me, she didn't see just another stranger turning away. She saw someone who could have stood by her, but chose not to. And now, years later, she was still carrying the weight of my betrayal. Her lips trembled now, like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the strength. Her children huddled closer, sensing something in the air, their wide eyes darting between us. The youngest whimpered softly, tugging at her mother's sleeve, and my chest tightened. They didn't understand. They only knew hunger, exhaustion, and a world that already seemed stacked against them. I took a step closer, and for the first time she flinched. That tiny movement cut deeper than any words could. She was afraid of me, not because I was a threat, but because I represented everything she had lost. My clean clothes, my steady steps, my full stomach. All of it was a mirror of the life she had once dreamed of, but had been denied. I opened my mouth, finally forcing the words out. "I'm sorry." My voice was rough, uneven, but it carried the truth I had buried for too long. She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes wet but unblinking. And in that silence I realized how powerless my apology was. Sorry wouldn't feed her children. Sorry wouldn't erase the years of judgment. Sorry wouldn't fix the fact that society had marked her as unworthy. And I had let it happen. My chest burned. I wanted to scream at the world around me, to stop the strangers passing by and force them to see her, to see the injustice sitting right there on the ground. But no one stopped. No one cared. And I realized that was the story of her life. Always unseen, always unheard. Her eldest child, maybe 7 or 8, tugged at her again. "Mama, can we go now?" His voice was so small, yet it carried a weight far too heavy for someone his age. She nodded gently, gathering their things, or what little they had, and began to rise. Panic surged through me. She was leaving. If she walked away now, this moment would vanish into the noise of the city, and I would never get the chance to make it right. "Wait!" I blurted out, louder than I meant to. A few people glanced our way before moving on. She froze, but she didn't turn. My hands shook as I dug into my bag, pulling out what I had, money crumpled between trembling fingers. I reached toward her, desperate. But the way she looked back at me, it wasn't hunger in her eyes. It wasn't even desperation. It was something far stronger, It was dignity. She straightened her shoulders, clutching her youngest closer, and shook her head. The refusal was quiet but firm. She didn't want my pity. She didn't want handouts. She wanted what had been stolen from her years ago. Her voice, her respect, her right to be seen as human. And in that moment, it hit me like a blow. This wasn't about charity. This was about justice. And justice was far more than a few bills pressed into her hands. Tear blurred my vision as I realized how deeply the system had failed her. How deeply I had failed her. And now, standing in front of her again, I felt the crushing weight of that truth pressing down on me. I whispered, more to myself than to her. This isn't fair. None of this is fair. Her eyes softened, just slightly, and for a moment, I saw the girl I used to know, the one who had laughed, who had dreamed, who had believed she could fight the world and win. But just as quickly, the hardness returned. Life had carved that into her face, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. She turned away, guiding her children down the crowded street, her figure slowly swallowed by the blur of strangers. And I stood there, frozen, my chest hollow, my soul burning with the weight of what I had just witnessed. Because I knew this was more than her story. This was a reflection of a world where voices like hers are silenced, where lives like hers are erased, where people like me walk past because it's easier not to look too closely. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't just keep walking. I couldn't move for a long time. The crowd kept flowing around me, brushing past as though nothing had happened. As though the weight crushing my chest was invisible to everyone else. Maybe that's how it had always been. Her pain hidden in plain sight. Ignored because it was easier for the world to keep walking. But I couldn't just walk away anymore. Not after looking into her eyes. Not after seeing the children clinging to her, as if she were their only shield against a world determined to break her. My legs felt weak, trembling, as I sank onto the edge of a bench nearby. My hands were still shaking, my palms clammy, the crumpled bills I had tried to give her now damp with sweat. I stared at them, realizing just how meaningless they were. Money could buy a meal for tonight, maybe even tomorrow, but it couldn't buy back dignity. It couldn't undo the silence I had given her when she needed me most. I kept replaying the moment in my head. Her flinch when I stepped closer. Her refusal to take what I offered, the steel in her eyes when she turned away. That single shake of her head had said more than words ever could. It was as if she was telling me, you cannot fix this with scraps. What I needed from you, you didn't give when it mattered. The truth hurt, because it was undeniable. I hadn't been there when she needed someone to stand up beside her. I had chosen comfort, safety, and silence. And now, years later, I was standing in the ruins of that choice. A part of me wanted to chase after her, to beg her to listen, to pour out every ounce of regret and sorrow choking me. But what good would that do? She didn't need my guilt. She didn't need my tears. She needed a world that didn't crush her for simply existing. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just one story. This was a mirror held up to all of us. How many times had people like her been ignored, dismissed, erased? How many lives had been stripped bare by whispers, lies, and prejudice, while people like me stayed silent because it wasn't our fight. The realization was like fire in my veins. My chest burned with a mix of shame and determination. For the first time, I understood that silence wasn't neutral. It was siding with the oppressor. Every time I had chosen to stay quiet, I had chosen them, not her. And I could never undo that choice. But maybe I could choose differently now. I wiped at my face, only then realizing tears had been sliding down my cheeks the whole time. I thought about her children, their wide, watchful eyes, the way they pressed into her side, the way they had already learned to live in a world that expected nothing from them except survival. They deserved more than that. They deserved a future where they could walk freely, without the weight of lies, without the sting of prejudice following them at every step. The question clawed at me. What kind of person do I want to be from this moment forward? Because this story, her story, my story, wasn't over. It couldn't end with me just sitting on a bench, grieving what I didn't do. If I walked away now, then I was no different than the strangers who had glanced at her and looked away. I stood up, legs still unsteady, but heart pounding with a new kind of strength. I didn't know where she was going. I didn't even know if I'd ever see her again. But I knew this: her presence, her refusal, her strength. It had lit something in me that couldn't be put out. Her life had been twisted by injustice. But in that moment, she had given me a gift she didn't even know. She had forced me to see, to really see. And once you see, you can't unsee. That night, when I finally got home, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind a storm. Every sound outside, the cars passing, the occasional shout, the city breathing, felt like a reminder of her voice that had been stolen, her laughter that had been silenced, her dreams that had been trampled. I realized then that telling her story wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every voice that had been drowned out, every truth buried, every injustice that had been forced into silence. I whispered her name into the darkness, almost like a prayer. And I promised myself I would not forget. I would not let the world forget, because stories like her don't just vanish. They repeat. They ripple. They live on in every person who has ever been told they don't belong, in every child who grows up feeling unseen, in every family forced to carry burdens they never deserved. And the terrifying question that stayed with me was this: how many more times will this happen before we finally listen? Before we finally change? The answer scared me. But maybe that fear was the point. Maybe it was what we needed to keep us awake, to keep us from turning away again. Her image is still burned in my mind. The firmness in her stance, the children at her side, the strength she carried even when the world tried to strip it from her. And whenever I close my eyes, I hear her silence louder than any scream. It was a silence that spoke the truth. This isn't just my story. This is everyone's story. And you can choose to stay silent, or you can choose to finally speak. And that choice is mine now. It's yours too. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see her. The street, the children, the way she turned her head just slightly, as if she couldn't bear to let me see her pain, but also couldn't completely hide it. It plays in my mind like a loop, the kind you can't switch off, no matter how badly you want to. Days have passed since that moment. But inside me, it still feels raw, like an open wound that refuses to heal. Sometimes I wonder if fate placed me there that day on purpose. If it wasn't just some cruel coincidence, but a chance, maybe my only chance, to face what I had buried for so long. And the truth is, I don't know if I passed or failed that test. Because yes, I saw her. Yes, I reached out. But when it mattered most years ago, I didn't. And that's the weight I carry now. The part that keeps me awake at night. I've started noticing things differently since then. The city looks the same. Busy streets, flashing signs, and less noise. But my eyes don't skim over the faces anymore. I see them. Every person huddled on a corner. Every mother holding a child with tired arms. Every man who looks like the world stopped caring about him a long time ago. And each time I ask myself, who are they really? What story hides behind those eyes? Because if her story could be forgotten so easily, then how many others are fading into silence right now? How many lives are being erased simply because no one bothers to look closely? The guilt comes in waves, sharp and suffocating, but mixed with it is something else. Resolve. I can't change the past. I can't rewrite the nights she suffered alone, or the mornings her children woke up hungry. But maybe, just maybe, I can use what I carry now to stop another story from being lost. I think about her children the most. Their eyes haunt me, innocent but already heavy, as though they had learned too early what it means to be invisible. What kind of future will they have if the world continues to turn its back? Will they grow up believing they're worth less because of the cards they were dealt? Or will someone finally step in, break the cycle, and remind them they matter? And then the hardest thought of all. What if that someone was supposed to be me? It's terrifying to admit how easy it is to look away. To convince yourself it's not your problem, not your responsibility. But I know now that's how injustice survives. Not only through the cruelty of those who create it, but through the silence of those who allow it to keep breathing. The truth is, her story is my story too. It's all of ours. It's the story of a society that builds walls between people. Walls so tall and so thick that we forget who's on the other side. But when those walls crack, even for a moment, the truth pours out. And once it touches you, you can't go back to pretending it's not there. Since that day, I've been carrying her silence like a message carved into my skin. A reminder that comfort is dangerous when it blinds you to suffering. That success means nothing if it costs you your humanity. That wealth isn't just money. It's time, attention, and the choice to act when others stay still. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. Maybe I never will. Maybe our stories only collided for that brief, painful moment, never to cross again. But she left me with something more lasting than words. She left me with truth. And that truth is this. People don't disappear because they fail. They disappear because the world chooses not to see them. So now I ask myself every single day, will I keep choosing not to see? Will you? Because her silence still speaks. It speaks in the empty spaces where laughter used to live. It speaks in the hollow places carved out by injustice. It speaks every time another child goes to bed hungry, every time another woman is pushed to the margins, every time a person is reduced to nothing more than a shadow on the street. Her silence has become my responsibility, and whether I like it or not, I have to answer it. And maybe, just maybe, you do too. So, when you walk through your city, when you see someone who seems invisible, ask yourself, What if their story is tied to yours? What if one small choice could change the course of a life? Would you walk away? Or would you finally stop and listen? Because one day, when it's too late, you might realize the person you turned away from was someone you once knew. Someone whose life could have been rewritten if you had only chosen differently. And trust me, that kind of silence will never leave you.